Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. We will now begin the TTA-ETSI Workshop on EU-Korea cooperation. This workshop is organized in the context of the INDICO project, the European Commission initiative. I hope this opportunity will boost our cooperation and make it even more operational. Before I start the workshop, I'd like to request all the speakers and participants turn off your cameras and sound systems except the speakers. Now, I'd like to invite Luis Jorge Romero, Director General of the European Telecommunication Standards Institute, for his welcome address. Mr. Romero, would you please turn off your camera and sound system?
Here we are. Thank you very much for having us here. And thank you very much to the organizers because they have allowed us to be today in between this Global ICT Standards Conference that TTA hosts annually. So it's a pleasure being able that through INDICO we could progress and put this little session about our cooperation between the EU and South Korea, and having this workshop dedicated to standards, ICT standards cooperation. I wouldn't lie if I said that it's been decades that we've been cooperating with TTA in the world of standards, and has been a very, very pleasant and very fruitful cooperation all throughout the years. Today, we will have a program which is very much focused on trying to understand a little bit what the digital society is bringing us, and we will have views coming from the European Union and South Korea, all related to digital, to the new digital. In fact, I would like to, rather than being here in a little room down in the south of France, be able to be with you physically present there in Korea, but unfortunately this won't be the case. I think this won't be the case for a few months still. Let's take advantage of anyway the opportunities that we ourselves give with having and enabling all these tools that, as opposed to any other era in our history, we are, despite being confined, being very connected. We will then in today's workshop address two other very important subjects that are related to what we are living today. First, data and the importance of data in the new economy and the new society. And then how standards have a big role to play in what we call smart cities, some like to call smarter cities. And I think this is very relevant. But before jumping into the workshop, just a couple of lines. First, seeing how important it is our cooperation globally, and this sees a benefit, or we see the benefit of this cooperation all in our daily lives. I think that it's today the most difficult thing to see in today's society is somebody without a mobile phone. I must say that thanks to the excellent cooperation that we have with TTA, and that we all have together with other standard organizations all over the world, enabling people having a phone in your pockets is a result of our good cooperation and of standards. It's going unseen, but it's definitely one of the results that you can all see. Then we talk a lot about the Internet of Things, and here I'm happy to say that TTA is cutting edge in this respect with regards to standards. We all share as well a great contribution and a great collaboration in a project, a global project, again with other SDOs, where I think TTA is getting a good lead, And now we are working together in order to enable doing some interoperability tests to make sure that when our things are interconnected, we won't face any kind of difficulty, and it's a little bit kind of plug and play all over the world. As I said, our cooperation with TTA has been it's long-standing. It's a real pleasure. We are very connected to each other. I want to take this opportunity to say hello and thank my good friend Casey Koo for enabling to be here today together and to wrap this very interesting workshop that I hope you will enjoy. To close up, I would say that please make the most of this workshop. I know that it would have been so much better if we could meet each other and have a coffee out and exchange on our different subjects. But this is not going to be the case, unfortunately. Anyway, I know there are very interesting discussions taking place. Let's take the opportunity that our remote tools or our connectivity tools enable us to outreach even to a wider audience. So let's try and take advantage of this bigger and broader outreach, and let's make the most out of this very interesting workshop. Lots of things to learn, lots of things to discuss. Please be interactive, be proactive, participate. Thank you again for your time. Thank you again for having us here in this session. And I think it's time for me to hand over to the next session, which starts by seizing the opportunities of digital society. Very interesting speakers. And I think my good colleague, Margot Dor, who is the Director of Government Affairs in ETSI, will have the pleasure to moderate. Having said which, wish you a very nice and successful workshop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Romero. Now, let me start our first session. I will hand over to the moderator of the first session, Margot Dor, Director of Government Affairs from ETSI. Margot, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kate. Thank you very much, TTA and ICT for organizing this session and having me moderate what I consider to be an extremely interesting session with two distinguished speakers. The title of the workshop, Enabling the New Normal Through ICT Standards Cooperation, is already quite an interesting point. I mean, the new normal is going to be situations like the pandemic, which are, let's hope, exceptional situation. And also the new normal is the digital life. The fact that we increasingly have service provided online, public services, private services, and there are a number of opportunities to size in this context, and we see that this world is actually taking shape. In this shaping of this new normal, if I may say, standards are indeed a big part of the equation, but also the policy, the regulation, the research, the whole, actually the whole parameters in the ecosystem. And this morning's session is going to be addressing this with two very distinguished speakers, all the way, and it will start all the way from innovation, all the way to deployment on society and touch upon policy and regulatory issues. We have two very interesting speakers. We have Mr. Junong Ha. I hope I'm pronouncing the name all right, who is Director for Innovation Network Team at the Ministry of Science and ICT. So innovation, here we are. Science and ICT, here we are. And then we have Tony de Coster, who is an advisor for international outreach at ECDG Connect. So the digital, let's say, directorate, quote unquote, and who has been dealing throughout his career with innovation policy for ICT, then the Innovation Union in DG Research. So I think what's going to be very interesting this morning in this session will be to see how the different elements, regulation, policy, regulation, industrial strategy, research, standards, etc., can enable innovation in the digital society. So I will hand over, without further ado, I'm sorry, do you want me to, is there a specific order? Do we want to go through the order of the agenda? In which case, Tony starts, and he will discuss the European digital strategy. As you know, there is a quite recently installed European Commission, which has very big ambition in the digital space. And Tony is going to present this to us. Tony, please.
Good morning, Margot. Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen, excellencies in Korea. And first of all, I mean, maybe a word to introduce myself. Margot already kindly did so. I work for the European Commission, which is the executive branch of the European Union, in a Directorate General, so the department which indeed is in charge of digital policy and covers both the regulatory policy aspects of digital, whether it's telecommunications, cybersecurity, audiovisual, you name it, and also the research aspects, and also works, of course, on the aspects of standardization for digital. And this morning, I just, as a sort of introductory remarks, and I'll try not to be too long, I would just briefly like to present how in the European Union we would like to shape our digital future. And then also, of course, today in this context, also talk about our cooperation with Korea. This cooperation, first of all, I'd like to very much thank TTA for this invitation and our friends in ETSI for this possibility of organizing this seminar. It shows, as Luis Romero pointed out in his opening remarks, that we have this very long-standing cooperation. And of course, that is a token because we have shared values, and I will return to that a little bit later. But first, a brief overview of the European Union's digital strategy. The title of today's event already shows it, so I'm stating the obvious. Digital technologies, products, services are essential for our economies and for our societies. If anyone was still doubting this, I think with the COVID crisis, they have been really confronted with that reality. I mean, it really proves the point more than ever. There is no new normal without digital. Without digital, during this crisis, during this pandemic, our economies would have been at a total standstill, and our societies, the human context, and even events like this would just simply not have been possible. In the EU, there has been a long-standing recognition of this importance of digital, but as Margot in her opening remarks already said, the current new Commission, led by President von der Leyen, has really put digital on the absolute forefront. It is one of our 6 main priorities for the 5 years mandate of Mrs. von der Leyen's Commission. And this builds on the important work that has been done in the 5 preceding years to get our digital single market fully functioning and therefore be prepared for this wave whereby digital becomes really essential for all sectors of the economy and society. Mrs. von der Leyen has presented a very ambitious package of planned measures. It would take us too much time today to run through all of them, but let me just highlight a few of the most important ones. But first, to really, again, state maybe what is the obvious. Our measures, our digital policy are based and are a reflection of the values also which we have for digital. Democratic values, high levels of protection of personal data, rule-based, stakeholder model, and values whereby our policy ensures that the EU's technological autonomy is secured. And that means the integrity and the resilience of our data and network infrastructure, which is important for technologies such as supercomputing, microelectronics, quantum technology, blockchain, cloud. Cybersecurity has become an absolute vital priority. And in that context, the European Union has presented last year its 5G toolbox, an evidence-based approach to make sure that as we move to the deployment of 5G, our networks are absolutely secure. At the same time, we've also announced a revision of our so-called network information security directive. And in early 2001, we will be presenting a legal framework for artificial intelligence after long preparatory work which has been done to look at the ethical guidelines and preparatory work which we've done with an independent high-level expert group, which has precisely looked at these ethical issues. Another important point, it's also been said by Luis in his opening words, is that we need to unleash this data economy. And to do that, the European Union will act with, the European Commission will present two pieces of legislation. First, a so-called Digital Services Act towards the end of this year, which will entail legislation to address issues around the responsibility of platforms. We need to go a step further than existing legislation about the relation between platforms and businesses. So in situations where platforms act as gatekeepers. And secondly, we need to look at issues such as due diligence, obligations for illegal content and sales of illegal goods, which can happen on these platforms. And the second part of our strategy on data is the data strategy itself. So there we will look at how to tackle governance issues, at developing an EU cloud capacity and developing common data spaces within the European Union, and also, of course, cooperating on that with our friends around the world. Last but not least, the COVID pandemic has also created a very important economic crisis, and the European Union has announced unprecedented measures to tackle this economic crisis with a very, very important and totally new program called Next Generation EU to recover, to make sure that the European economy can recover and can come out of this crisis transformed to make sure that we become a green economy, a greener economy through the so-called implementation of the Green Deal, but also a digital economy. So a very profound transformation of our economy towards digital. And to that effect, the European Union has decided that 20% of these new funds, and that those 20% alone already amount to 136 billion euros, will have to be dedicated to investments to make this digital transformation happen. So that is what we are doing in the European Union. I mean, some of the highlights of
Tony. The host has asked you to start your video. I'm starting my video. Hi. Thank you very much, Tony, for this broad panorama of how the European Commission is handling or framing the digital future of Europe. Now we're gonna have I need to find my notes. We're gonna have Mr. Yoon Hong Ha, which is gonna be discussing from the Innovation Network team, actually, that is heading in the Ministry of Science and ICT, who's gonna be discussing the R&D strategies in Korea for future mobile comms and leading in the 6G era, which I think matches very well with what you said and the need for global cooperation and probably global standards. Mr. Yoon Hong, sorry.
Hello everyone, thanks for having me. I'm Jun Hong Ha, Director of Innovation Network Team, Ministry of Science and ICT of Korea. I'll make a presentation on R&D strategy of future mobile communications to lead the 6G era. My presentation will go in this order. First, background. The generation of mobile communications follow a 10-year maturity cycle, and the first movers in the technology and standards have led the global market. With the recent COVID-19 pandemic, there are growing demands for reliable and trustworthy network infrastructure. Therefore, this is a time for us to make a full preparation for 6G to become the first mover in the market and actively respond to changes. Let's take a look at the development of mobile communication by generation. When the technologies of a new generation come, fierce competition follows, resulting in dramatic changes in the market dominance of leading companies. Preemptive technologies development and securing standards in advance is necessary for becoming the first mover in the market and securing the initiative. As part of these reports, since September 2018, when the research on 6G PFS, the preliminary feasibility study, was started, the Korea has been taking diverse opinions from experts in the private sector. As a result, this April, the PFS was passed, and we can lay a foundation for securing 6G core technologies. Next, I will move on to overseas and domestic trends and implications. 6G is a future core infrastructure, realizing an intelligent and non-contact society in a more convenient and safer ways. This will accelerate the B2B convergence between ICT and other industries, which was triggered by 5G. The competition for 6G technology hegemony among the major countries has already started. Last year, for the first time in the world, Korea successfully launched the 5G service in the market. This was possible as we have steadily built up technological competitiveness by starting 5G R&D right after the 4G commercialization. Thanks to these efforts, we have been able to flexibly respond to the global battle of the technological hegemony. Based on our experience, I do believe that the next year, the second year of 5G commercialization, is the best time to start 6G R&D. With the world's first launch of 5G service, we achieved the first place in the global market share of 5G devices and the third place in the 5G equipment. However, there are also limitations. B2B convergence services have less grown than we had expected, and you are still dependent on foreign patents significantly. In 6G, we need to overcome these and lay a firm foundation for the growth of new industries. Next is vision and strategies. In order to lead the sixth era, where imagination becomes reality, Korea will push forward with 3 strategies and 8 action plans. These are to develop the next generation technologies and standards, patterns, and to lay an industrial basis. Our first strategy is preemptively securing the world's best 6G technologies. To successfully do this, a total of 250 billion won will be invested in 10 core 6G technologies, which are innovative and promising area, but difficult to be covered by private investment immediately. Joint research with various countries and enhance international cooperation. From 2026, when early-stage technology development is completed, we will make efforts for the new technologies to be launched as a service in the market. This will be done through 6G upgrade pilot project, which applies 6G technologies, the five major services of 5G in other fields. Our second strategy is making Korea's 6G technologies reflected in the global standards. In cooperation with the Korea Intellectual Property Office, a strategy map for standard patents will be built up. High value-added standards and patents will be obtained through IP R&D. We will also build up our leadership in global standards by reinforcing the international cooperation and fostering standard patent experts. Our third strategy is building a firm basis for research and industrial growth. We will develop hardware and software prototypes, which can be used for 6G core parts and equipment localization. At the same time, we will provide R&D support to promising small and medium enterprise in the high-tech material, components, and equipment industries through voucher system. In addition to this, our efforts will also be made to strengthen partnership between R&D participating in universities and companies, and to nurture a qualified workforce. Let's move on to implementation system. We will operate 6G R&D Strategy Committee so that we can have a strong collective capabilities of industry, academia, and research. This committee will share and evaluate the goals and outcomes of projects, and if necessary, through mid-assessment in 2023, we'll evaluate core technologies for investment. This brings me to the end of my presentation. Thanks for your attention. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi. So I guess we have, how much time do we have for a few questions?
I
Kate,
think you
how
have
much-
about 6-7 minutes.
Okay, are there questions from the audience that you would have gotten on your side, or can we move on with a panel of the speakers? Kate, did you get questions from the audience, or am I going with Kate?
I don't have any questions received.
Okay. Okay. I have a question for actually both speakers. I have a question for both speakers, because both their presentations touched upon, how can I say, Tony talked about technological autonomy. The second speaker talked about leadership, etc. So in your view, how can we articulate these objectives of autonomy or leadership, etc., with the global aspect of standards and digital in general? And this is a question for both speakers. Does it clash? How are we going to organize this? Thank you. And also, we welcome questions on the chat.
Yeah, thank you, Margot. I think indeed, I mean, the digital is a global phenomenon. That's also an obvious statement, but it is worth remembering that. And I think the key to success is indeed, I mean, the two are absolutely work hand in hand. The development of standards is absolutely essential to make sure that you have this a policy whereby you can have technological leadership, i.e. a first mover, and making sure that you have an industry which is well developed and which at the same time ensures that you have this technological autonomy, which we think in the European Union is also very important. I mean, that very much depends on developing the technology and standards, the technological standards that go behind it. And I mean, it's clear that cooperation, international cooperation, is also very much a part of that.
Okay. Mr. Junong Ha, do you want to answer to that question? Oh, Mr. Casey Koo, sorry. We cannot hear you. We cannot hear you. You don't have, your mic is off.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for a very good question. First of all, I very much appreciate your coordinator, and I'm very sorry, Mr. Hong from MSIT is not available this time. This previous video is just the putting situation. So if I may, even I'm not the government side person. Actually, I'm working for a TTA, private sector. But as far as I know, I would like to try to explain my my answer to your question. It's very broad question about you. Actually, Korea this year announced and released the two big major policies, such as the first one is the 6G R&D program. And the second one, maybe yesterday, Mr. Dr. Kim from MSIT delivered a Korean New Deal policy. Maybe I'm not sure you might aware of the Korean New Deal. It's a very big program. Let me say the introduction of Korean New Deal. Maybe you are aware of the New Deal policy back in 1930 of the U.S., driven by Roosevelt president. But very similar to Korean New Deal. Korean New Deal, there are two big pillars. The first one is digital New Deal. Second one is the Green New Deal. While Green New Deal concentrates on the carbon net zero policy, focusing on the hydro-oxygen economy. But another one is the digital New Deal. The main idea is that we construct a data dam, not a physical dam, for AI. So as far as you know, until 2025, the Korean government invests about the 160 trillion won, equal to maybe 116 euro, millionaire. I'm not sure. Anyway, this is just
We'll
the
check.
Korean television. Yeah. Okay, this is the digital world, and then we Korean the leading the role and cooperation other countries. That is my short answer. Thank you.
If I may, Tony might want to pick up on this, because in Europe we have the so-called twin transition, which is to lead at the same time the transition in digital and in green, which is because of the emergency with regard to both areas and climate. We in southern France just experienced a very scary episode which shows the emergency to deal with the green issue at the same time as digital. So this, what you're saying, Mr. Koo, just resounds very, very, very well. Tony, do you want to say something about the twin transition, or yes?
Yeah, I'd like to react very much to what Mr. Koo was saying. I mean, it's very telling. I mean,
yes.
As I tried to point out, the European Union and Korea, we have a lot of shared values and shared priorities. I mean, this transition, or this twin transition between making our economy, our societies greener and making them more digital, is absolutely also the way we're going in the European Union. I mentioned, as part of the next generation EU, that we are putting so the recovery funds of an unprecedented size, we are putting at least 20% of that money, which amounts to 136 billion euros. And I'm sorry, I don't know how much that is in won, but it is a huge amount. We're putting at least 20% of that on the digital transformation, but we also announced as European Union that we will put at least 30% on the transformation towards, the implementation of what we call the Green Deal. And so making our economies less dependent on carbon. So, I mean, this is very important. So that means that about more than half the money that will go towards the recovery of our economies as a consequence of the COVID pandemic will go to this double transition. And these amounts are really, as said, unprecedented. It's also important to stress that the two work together. I mean, these are the two are related. Digital can also very importantly contribute to tackling climate change. We're as part of our efforts in the European Commission in DG Connect, we're also working very strongly on that. We are promoting supercomputing, and one of the areas where we want supercomputing to focus on is notably on climate change, on the modeling. We have a project called Destination Earth, on which also we are regularly, as part of our international relations with our like-minded countries, we're often discussing the possibilities to cooperate on that. The idea is that you sort of create a twin for modeling purposes, twin of the Earth for modeling purposes, such as notably climate change. So, I mean, the digital can have and will have very, very positive effects on the climate change, on tackling climate change, on the greening of our economy. But we also need to make sure that the footprint of digital, the sort of the carbon footprint of digital, or the environmental footprint of digital, is also reduced. And that's also something which, as part of the Green Deal, in the European Union we're working at.
Thank you very much. Well, I would like to maybe conclude this panel because of the time by saying that this all shows the need for continuing and maybe further developing the cooperation between EU and Korea, and especially in the standardization field, like what ETSI and TTA, or TTA and ETSI have been doing for a long time, as Louis said. It's standards, but it's also policy and regulation, and this is going to be a very interesting period ahead of us. The good news with regard to standards is that today is 14th of October is World Standards Day. So I think it's a good day to talk about cooperation, global cooperation when it comes to standards. And I would like to thank very much the speakers and hand back to Kate for the continuation of the sessions. Thank you very much.